This is Roger Struckoff at day 2 of CloudEXPO in Santa Clara, and I'm sitting with Simon Jones of Cedexis, and he's got a topic that in this environment is a wonderful topic, maybe out in the real world, and who knows, but I don't care. Welcome, and let's talk about software-defined, that's always nice here,
Oh yes.
data traffic management. Software-defined data traffic management. Now, as I understand it, data is growing, but you've outlined some specific problems that, like, the problem's far worse than just data is growing, right? And welcome, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yes, the problem is much greater than that. There's plenty of bandwidth out there, but it's never in the right place. So what Cedexis does is uses data to work out the best pathways to get data from the origin to the person who wants to get it. And really what that's all about is balancing what the service provider has promised with the cost of getting it there. So if you imagine you're watching a video, if you've paid $15 a month for that service, you expect really high quality, and so that company's going to be looking largely for quality. If you're watching something that's free and you got some ads going on, you understand you're not getting 4K pictures, so that company's going to have a different set of expectations. They're going to want to meet a certain level of quality, but they're not going to want to overpay for it.
Now, you'd mentioned a lot of logistical stuff, like the number of parking spaces in the U.S. versus cars. And that's just one example, and maybe not the most profound one, but it is a good one. So what was that situation?
Well, what I always say is there are 8 billion parking spaces in the United States of America, and yet on Christmas Eve, when I go to buy my wife a Christmas present at the last moment, there's never anywhere to park, even though there's only 250 million cars. The reality is there's plenty of parking spaces, but they're not in the right place. And in the same way, there's plenty of bandwidth, but it's not necessarily in the right configuration between where the data starts and where the data needs to get to.
So we have to stress the network, and someone has to pay for the technology, because you wait until Christmas Eve to buy a Christmas present for your wife, exactly. You and everybody else. But these logistical things happen. It's like an asymmetry of information, and also when you mention quality of service, because everybody likes to talk about quality, but you mentioned an example where it's not necessarily the fastest that people are looking for. Is that kind of what the world you're living in general? Different qualities of service, different odd logistical problems?
Oh, absolutely. The reality is that you want to provide a service that meets your customers' expectations, but you don't want to overpay in a way that doesn't really make anybody any better. There's no point. Interesting story, Netflix have been redoing the way that they transcode their movies so that you will never get a 14 meg stream of a cartoon because there's not enough moving parts in it. So even though you get the HD, it's actually a much smaller file. So they've worked out the right way to maximize the experience and yet to minimize the cost. And that's exactly what we're all about, is meet the needs of your audience without overpaying.
Do you do IoT stuff at all, or the things where you're looking into, like smart parking meters and smart electrical grids and stuff like that?
We don't do very much of that today. We expect to. Ultimately, all of those IoT devices have to call home from time to time to find stuff out. Eventually, there will be enough of them out there that they will start running into congestion problems. And so we anticipate that the manufacturers will build in our code so that when those devices reach out to touch a microservice, an API, instead of going to a fixed endpoint, they'll come to one of our logical endpoints, which will then be able to use its vision of the internet to go and connect them to the right instance of that API and really speed up the experience on those IoT devices.
Maybe you can help me. So there's a movie called Little Big Man years ago that's fairly a classic. So if you haven't seen it, it's a good movie to see. So the IoT stuff I call little big data. I'm trying to get, because classic big data, if you go way back, was meteorological stuff, epidemiological stuff, geophysical stuff, oil exploration, massive files. And then you started to get the idea of, no, there's a lot of devices sending smaller signals. And some of these IoT things where you've got a tiny little device and it's kicking out 10K every minute or every 15 seconds, but you get 1 million of them and you got big data. And I call that a little big data. and someone's going to have to be optimizing that or handling it or figuring out the cost of it, it sounds to me.
That's exactly right, because once you reach a critical mass of data traveling down the same pathways, it's just like a pipe that you'd send water down. Eventually it's full and nothing else is going to happen. And like I say, that's why I think they'll be using logical endpoints to work out the right pathways to move through. So instead of having one pipe that's completely full, they'll utilize 2, 3, 4 pipes which are partially full. Look, what happens with data right now with the bandwidth is, if it's a really busy evening on the internet, you end up with the equivalent of a noisy neighbor problem, right?
Yes.
Right. So imagine it's Thursday night, everyone's watching the football, they're flowing through. All of that video is taking up huge amounts of the pipe. If it's running through one CDN, that CDN can't get anything else through. So you're just looking for ways to choose different pathways.
And I gotta hand it to Netflix. It's a consumer product. Consumers have like this much patience. They want to pay this much, and they have like this much patience. If you're in the B2B business, there's a little more. Things get pretty intense. A little more tolerance, I think. But once you're serving consumers, man, they want it all for nothing.
They want it all for free, and they want it all to be awesome.
Now, instead of listening to me talking about little big data and stuff, how do they find you? Where's the URL? Where can people go and really do a deep dive in what you're talking about?
Come find us at www.cedexis.com. That's CEDEXIS.com.
Can't beat it. Simon, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching for Syscon TV. This is Roger Struckoff.